Good afternoon, Allan Friesen here. I have Ryan over here, Vanessa over here. I was going to share with them something about a occupational health and safety session that I attended about 10 days ago, and I just didn't have a chance to do that. So I'm going to share it with them now and then ask for their comments if you have any as we go through this, okay? So by the way, here's how this came to be. Lethbridge Chamber of Commerce has an HR policy committee headed up by Dave Hazley from Barsteel, and then there's members on that committee that we work together to figure out situations, changes in HR policy, changes in legislation, changes in practices, changes in group benefit programming, those kind of things that might be of value to chamber members, well, to the business community in general. So we do these things on a regular basis. So about 10 days ago, we had one through the Chamber of Commerce that was hosted at Volunteer Lethbridge. They were so kind as to have us host there. And then that session had about occupational health and safety. And occupational health and safety has always had a violence issue, or a violence component to the legislation, but recently added in an harassment part of it as well. So it's now violence and harassment. The violence never had very many people, as you might imagine, like that wasn't a whole series of complaints to do with the violence part. But now with the harassment, they've had a huge, I think it was 2,000 inquiries related to a harassment type situation. And many of them, of course, are very valid and justified. Bullying in the workplace, right? I mean, that's counterproductive for everybody involved. How can you work together with other people when there's that kind of a toxic environment? How can you serve your customers well? It doesn't make any sense, right? So they're doing great work in terms of stemming that harassment. Now that's falling on the employer to do that, right? So there's an extra obligation, but overall that'd be a worthwhile investment if you could eliminate bullying and harassment of any sort in the workplace, right? That'd be a positive thing. But one thing that did come out of it that I didn't think of is that in some cases, the employer is being faced with a situation where an employee is not doing what they were hired to do. And then in that, the person is just saying, hey, you can't talk to me about this because it's harassment. So you can't address my performance because I feel harassed. Well, obviously that's not the intent of the legislation. Now, some cases, does it make sense? Sure, the employer could get unreasonable, right? Can you think of an example of an employer getting unreasonable?
No.
No?
Not in my experience.
Not in your experience. Good. That's good to hear. Okay. But it could be where the employer has changed the rules. The employer has changed, right, what the expectation was. Well, that would be unreasonable, and that might be a cause for complaint of harassment against the employer. But if, in fact, the employer has hired somebody to do job X and job X is not being met, well, then the employee just can't say, oh, harassment, you can't talk to me about this. That doesn't make any sense. And I think the general theme is that employers kind of have to set a line in terms of what they can do and what beyond that is beyond the scope of an employer, whether that's a for-profit company or a not-for-profit agency, that they have to kind of set, this is what we can do and beyond here, we cannot. That's more of a public responsibility. And I guess what I'm thinking of, maybe somebody who has like really high drug need. They have a dependent who has a really high drug need. And then if the employer has no maxims whatsoever, no controls whatsoever, what could potentially go wrong? They have this huge, huge claim that gets incurred. Maybe that should be a public responsibility, not an employer responsibility. But in processing it as an employer responsibility, now maybe the employer has the lack of sustainability of their program, that they just can't keep it happening, right? So I think in all respects, the employer has to set some limit, obviously equal to or better than the legislated standard, but some limit, and document, this is what we will do, this is the extent of how we can help our employees live good lives, have a good work experience, and contribute to our customers or clients. So that's kind of a summary of what it is. So the harassment is a good thing in that bullying will then be addressed and hopefully stopped. But it's a bad thing in terms of if an employee is just going to use that to say, yeah, my performance sucks, but you can't talk to me because you're harassing me. Anything to add?
From all of that, I would say in general, it's good for employers and employees to have good communication. Make sure you're not just telling them something, but have it written down. If there is issues, have it written down. And that way there maybe is some paper backup if something did happen. And in terms of the benefit plan, it's a fine balance for the employer to find something that equals what they value. So if they want all their employees to be very healthy, they have to find a plan that works well with that, but also within their means of being able to pay for it. Because you don't want to end up having an open plan that will have everything covered and then have an employee use everything, and then you can no longer maintain a plan because you couldn't afford it, and then nobody has a plan. So it's a fine balance between what you can afford and kind of your values of what you want to cover.
Sure, that makes really good sense. So set some sort, do you have something to add?
That makes sense.
Okay, good. Ryan agrees with Vanessa. That makes sense. And I agree with Vanessa. You have to have some kind of limit on what the employer responsibility is, well communicated, well documented, right? And then you also brought up about if there's issues in the employment relationship where those get addressed and documented, because that was another thing that came up, that so there has been a bullying thing in a workforce for like 2 years. Now they're having to address it, and the performance evaluations say, oh, model employee, everything's perfect. But this bullying was occurring before, but never documented. And that is a real problem from an employment standards if that employee has to be terminated because of the bullying behavior. So anyways, a little insight for you. I'm going to attach to this the slide deck and a couple videos that we were able to access about it. BC WorkSafe, David Hazley had pointed out, has some excellent videos, and I watched a few of them on workplace safety and specifically about addressing bullying. If we can help, please do contact us. We would love to contribute to the success of your business or your agency, and keep well. Thanks much.